A couple years ago, we started working on a new strategic plan for the Food Council, trying to determine how we wanted to structure the council, how we wanted to work together, whether or not the Food Council should be its own standalone entity, whether or not we wanted to stay within the health department. There were a lot of those decisions that were made. But in the process of getting feedback from all the members of the Food Council, we started getting a pretty regular question of what is Food Council membership and what do I need to do to be a member of the Food Council? So we've uh, thought really long and hard about it, and we realized that probably the best way to work through this is to have an orientation process, and then at the end of the orientation process, people will be members of the Fairfax Food Council. So at the end of this presentation today, you will have completed the orientation process and will be a member of the Food Council. Sorry to preempt any actual business issues you were hoping for. Next month, you'll be back to regular business and talking about food access and food literacy. But this month, we're just going to be focused primarily on this. We're going to ask that everybody stay muted and save your questions until the end, when at the very end of the presentation, we'll be able to work through some questions and talk about some things. There'll be a short survey at the end as well that we'll be posting and ask you to give us a little bit of feedback. If you want to drop questions into the chat, thoughts into the chat, we can address those as we work our way through it as well. If there's any point where you can't hear anything or are running into any technological issues, please, you can send a direct message to Diane or Alyssa. They're both on right now and they can kind of make note of it. The plan for these presentations, this is the second one we're doing. We've recorded both of these. We're going to pick the best recording and show them later on and make them available. We may do a third recording at some point if neither one of them turns out great, and then we'll make those available as a video that people can work through. We're also going to be sharing this presentation that we're doing right now with you. So if you see links, QR codes, any of those things in the presentation, you'll be able to access those. Some of those may change after the presentation is finished or at some point in the next month or two. I know we're doing some transition of storage on the Fairfax website. And so it's the health department website where we're hosting everything. So things might move a little bit. We will send out updated presentations as those happen. We'll also try to give you a chance when a QR code comes up on your screen, if you want to grab your camera and your phone and take a snapshot of it or do a screenshot for later, feel free. But we're going to get going and start this process. So next slide, please. The Food Council was established as under the Partnership for Healthier Fairfax in 2015. The Food Council is one of several partnership groups. As part of the Partnership for Healthier Fairfax, we actually still participate in that process and attend regularly and are involved with the partnership. But the council started off in the early days as more of a steering committee, and we brought a group together and would talk about what's going to happen, what do we want to see from the council. And after about, I want to say 6 to 9 months of meeting, we ended up forming work groups and kind of working towards something that really resembles our current structure, which we'll describe a little more in detail as we go. Next slide, please. The Food Council is a coalition of community members, nonprofits, different faith partners, county agencies and county staff, and for-profit businesses. And it's important to really think about the council as a very democratic group. We really are aiming for this idea of working from the ground up, really want to get input from all of the members, and our goal is constantly to add members, reach out, hear voices we haven't heard from before. You'll hear a little bit more about specific efforts along those lines. But really, we're trying to hear from all the different sectors of the food system, different people who may play a role in some capacity in the food system and get them involved. And the Food Council advocates for and promotes food system and policy changes to benefit all of Fairfax communities with an emphasis on really targeting and supporting underserved communities. And so that's the general gist of what we do. And I will pass this off to Dawn.
Thanks, Matt. Good morning, everyone. So, as we are privileged to live in one of the nation's wealthiest counties, we also recognize that there are individuals, families, and communities navigating disparities and inequities within our food system. In 2022, of the 1.1 million people that live in Fairfax County, over 67,000 people were experiencing food insecurity. This map illustrates through varying shades of green the areas throughout the county that were experiencing food insecurity from the least need to those of greater need. And of course, it goes without saying that the pandemic, along with other societal factors, poverty, low levels of education, income, health insurance, transportation, systemic racism, just to name a few, not only magnified pre-existing inequities within our food system, it also exacerbated them. Next slide, please. So 2 years ago, various members of our food council convened as a committee to develop a strategic plan that would explicitly and intentionally define our structure, governance, membership, and goals. Through this process, the committee also reviewed and enhanced our mission, vision, and value statements, serving as a compass to guide our direction and convey our purpose and goals. It was imperative that our mission, vision, and values aligned with our county's racial and social equity policy, One Fairfax, and also embodied a fully diversified, more inclusive, and holistic view of our food system, recognizing that our food system is broad, complex, and intersectional. Here is our mission statement: to advocate for an equitable local food system that produces and provides access to nutritious, sustainable, and affordable food for everyone. Next slide, please. And here's our vision statement: an equitable and sustainable food system where food is valued as a basic human right. Next slide, please. Our values statement, which as you can see, embodies many different values, all of which are necessary and critical to how we see and are involved within our food system and how we see and engage with the people in it. Highlighted in green, our values are collaboration, integrity, belonging, and on the next slide, respect, justice, sustainable, and equity. And now I'll turn it over back to Matt to talk about our structure and our various work groups.
This slide, you're going to see the organizational chart for the Food Council. You can see we have four main components: the executive committee, our work groups, our task forces, and the advisory council. The executive committee is made up of co-chairs. Currently, the Food Council co-chairs are Dawn and myself. We have our work group co-chairs, task force co-chairs, and the Food Council staff, who are Alyssa and Diane. The work groups are our standing work groups, the standing kind of subcommittees of the Food Council. For a number of years now, we've had the Urban Agriculture Work Group and the Food Access and Literacy Work Group. Those are structured where they have co-chairs, and then underneath the co-chairs, or at least the co-chairs leading the groups, are the general membership of the different work groups. Task forces are set up structured very similarly. However, task forces are considered more temporary groups. There is a process in the bylaws that allow us to take task forces and merge them and convert them into work groups in the future. But the idea is that these task forces are created with specific goals in mind and are set up as somewhat temporary with the option of becoming permanent in the future. Currently, we have two task forces. One is the Community Voice Task Force. Another is the Policy Task Force. As you can see, they also have co-chairs and general membership. And then the Advisory Council is a group that we're currently building and working on. This is not a traditional advisory council. We're looking at it more as a little black book that we can use to call on people and ask for help. And so to build out that advisory council, we are looking for representatives from different food system sectors, also referred to often in meetings now as food system actors because of the different roles they play in the system. And we're looking for people that represent different communities, different sectors of the food system, and have different perspectives that they can bring to the table and help out. We also have several youth representatives. We put out an announcement on a regular basis looking for applicants for the youth representatives, and then generally we'll bring on one or two, possibly more if we have funding for a year-long stint where they are the youth representatives for the Food Council and they receive a stipend to participate. We're currently also working on building something similar, trying to bring on some college-age representatives as well. We also have a standing representative from the Fairfax Emergency Food Strategy Team. That's another organization or structure or group that meets within under the health department, and there's a lot of overlap between the Food Council and the EFST, and so we like to have that connection and representation. And then current and past Food Council co-chairs, work group chairs, task force co-chairs. If you have anybody you'd like to recommend, we're really looking for folks who can help us not have to attend regular meetings, but really be able to give us advice, help us grease the skids a little bit on getting things moving as if we're running into challenges, or really thinking outside of the box on different topics and different issues, and helping move the ball forward on things. Next slide, please. And this is a more simplified representation. As you can see, we have the two work groups, food access and literacy, urban agriculture. Then we have community voice task force and policy task force, the executive committee, and the advisory council. Next. So we talked a little bit about work groups. The work groups are the permanent standing groups that do really the work of the Food Council. In general, we want the work groups to kind of take the lead and drive the business of the Food Council, while the executive committee really supports the efforts of those work groups. Next slide. So the work group role is to each work group develops and prioritizes their own plans. Typically, these are on an annual basis. They can go longer if they need to, but we can adjust and address that as needed. Normally, we'll start talking about the plans for the next year, kind of at the end of the previous year, and early in the year, we'll talk about those. So they'll prioritize what they want to work on. They're going to prioritize the method of delivery that they want to work on with their plans. Some work groups are a little more action oriented. Some are more oriented and focused on discussion and networking and creating policy. We've had work groups do different types of projects in the past, and we've had work groups that have really been about information sharing and coordination and collaboration. So the work groups develop and prioritize their own plans. They develop measurable goals and objectives. So there are some goals and some programs that do put a little bit of pressure on the work groups. Sometimes we get outside funding that has different requirements that we need to meet objectives and work on different aspects of projects. But the idea is that we want the work groups really to help drive that process, come up with goals of what they'd like to accomplish over the next year, how they're going to reach them, what the objectives are, really working through your typical SMART objectives and trying to develop plans and work towards them. And then the work groups also can think about, and we encourage them to think about the resources they may need for these implementing their plans, whether it's time and energy of the different members of the work group, or whether it might be funds or other resources that are needed. And so the work group can look at that, is allowed to and can really lead an effort on identifying funds and reaching out and trying to solicit donations or grants or those types of things. But also they can pass that information up to the executive committee, and the executive committee can work on putting together grant applications or finding partners that can come and help fund things. But also we really want to encourage the work groups to look around the table and think who else in the work group might also be able to help and support in that way. So we've had a history in the Food Council of different partners, member groups, soliciting funds and helping make programming happen. And then the work groups are allowed to organize and structure in whatever way they seem fit. We really encourage each group to meet or aim to meet once a month, but they can have subcommittees, they can have different subgroups, they can form ad hoc committees, they can meet more often, they can meet in person, they can meet online. So we really want the group to really set that agenda and set that structure and organization. Next slide, please. So each work group has a set of co-chairs of either 2 or 3 co-chairs, and it really depends on how many people can be involved and what that looks like. The co-chairs have will facilitate the meetings. They meet with Fairfax County staff on a regular basis to plan out what the meetings are and work through those. Um, so Diane and Alyssa meet at least once a month with each of the co-chair groups and talk about what are we going to do at the next meeting. That's how we put together the minutes and the agendas that you get in advance of most of these meetings. So there's a fair amount of organization that happens outside of the regular meetings. But right now there are three co-chairs for the Food Access and Literacy Work Group. That's Amy Biestek, Jillian Kimura, and Joe Dombia. And they are your current co-chairs. In addition to organizing your meetings, work with Dawn and myself to talk about policy issues, other system changes, and things that might happen. They also serve on the executive committee so they can interact and we can really facilitate cooperation between the work groups and the task forces. Each co-chair is asked to serve a 2-year term. We try to stagger those so everybody isn't off at the same time. And so we're really hoping and encouraging members of the work group to think about possibly stepping up into a role as a co-chair at some point. And so I think the next person who's going to rotate out in terms of being a co-chair is Amy in this group. And so as you think about that and what as we move through that, if you are interested in possibly serving as a co-chair, please let your work group co-chairs know that you'd be interested in doing that. And also you can share that information with Alyssa or Diane or anybody else in the group. Just let us know and we can kind of help make that happen in the future. We're looking for people who are just willing to contribute some time. It's probably 2 or 3 meetings a month is probably about the majority of it and a little bit of time outside of those meetings. So it's not an overly huge burden, but there is a little bit of work that we do ask of you. Next slide. So the Food Access and Literacy Work Group, that is this group that we're meeting with, is a group of partners with organizations that work to increase the number of healthy food access points in Fairfax community and in the areas of highest need. The values, this group really values making food literacy and nutrition education programming available through a variety of avenues. This group was originally 2 separate work groups. We had a food access work group and we had a food literacy work group, and we merged those 2 groups. At one point, I want to say it's probably been 4 years now, 5 years possibly. We merged those groups because there were some low turnout is probably a good way to phrase it as what was happening. But also in addition to that, we were seeing a fair amount of overlap between what the 2 groups were doing. We were realizing that food access was one thing, but in order to really facilitate and improve food access, there needed to be a food literacy side of what was going on with that. And so those 2 groups merged, and I think it's really been a productive merging in the sense that it really helps move things in the right direction on this. Next slide, please. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about ongoing projects that this group is doing. Next slide. First is the Care to Share Toolkit. This is a resource available for anyone who would like to learn or start a food waste rescue program at a Fairfax County public school. This is a kit that was put together by members of this group and some outside support. And we share this with different individuals, different school staff who are interested in putting together a food rescue plan at their schools. Next slide, please. Real Food for Real Change Toolkit. This is a type of curriculum that can be incorporated into after-school or community-based programs to introduce middle school students to fruits and vegetables. It creates positive experiences using activities and cooking to help students understand the larger picture around choices they make around food consumption. If you're interested in learning more about these, both toolkits are available, I believe, just through the website, but also if you want to access them and want more information about them, please reach out to Alyssa and Diane or your co-chairs. All right, next slide. The Urban Agriculture Work Group. The mission of the Urban Agriculture Work Group is that it supports local food production to improve the environmental, economic, and human health of the community. And the vision is that their vision is a healthy, beautiful, and equitable Fairfax County and cities of Fairfax and Falls Church, where fresh food is grown within walking distance of every kitchen. The current co-chairs on the Urban Agriculture Work Group are Cassandra Lawson and Juan Pablo Echeverria. I believe they're in the process now of Juan Pablo is going to be rotating off and a new co-chair is going to be coming in. So we'll provide that information when it's official. Next slide. Go ahead to the next one. The Urban Agriculture Work Group has a few different programs that they're working on. I will say this work group has been traditionally the most action-oriented work group. They generally put on a number of programs and have really accomplished some direct project results in the community, as well as a fair amount of advocacy efforts. One of their big programs that's going on right now is a school composting pilot program. This program helps get composting equipment and educational resources into schools in Fairfax County Public Schools that want to start composting programs. We're currently piloting with 5 schools and are it's just getting started this next year. Like they really identified the schools and started putting the processes together, and really in the 2024-2025 school year will be the first full year of the pilot with schools composting products in the schools. The goal for this is really to show that it can be done safely, and that it can be fit within a school environment. And then we're hoping that eventually that more schools will have composting programs in their schools. So in addition to food rescue and reducing food waste, that will have compost for any food waste that is created by the schools. Next slide. The Urban Agriculture Work Group also has a number of different educational programs they put on. And so this is one example of a workshop that they offer. They generally will do some online educational programming, some of it in person. They'll sometimes meet at different garden sites around the county or farm sites around the county. And they are really active in putting on direct workshops, classes, gardening, and production classes to residents of Fairfax County. And I will hand it back to Dawn.
Thanks, Matt. So, in addition to our work groups, we also have task forces, as Matt just mentioned. And what is a task force? Well, I'm glad you asked. It is a temporary group of experts who convene to accomplish a specific objective or task. Next slide, please. So, in similar fashion to our work groups, there are various roles that a task force fulfills, such as developing and prioritizing plans, developing measurable goals and objectives, resource consideration, and organizing. And with executive committee approval, a task force does in fact have the potential to evolve into a work group. Next slide, please. Also, in similar fashion to our work groups, our task forces also have chairs and co-chairs and have similar roles, such as participating and contributing to monthly planning meetings, working closely with the Food Council's co-chairs, that would be Matt and myself, serving a 2-year term, as well as serving on the Food Council's executive committee. Now, going back to the definition of a task force, remember I said that it is a temporary group of experts who convene to accomplish a specific objective or task. While that definition is true, it is also a little flawed in how the Food Council looks at its current 2 task forces, community voice and policy. The Food Council recognizes that the work of these 2 task forces are ongoing and can be incorporated into other efforts within our work groups and the Food Council at large. The key, which is what the executive committee is currently trying to ascertain, is how collaboration and cross-pollination is going to work with these 2 task forces. There is also recognition that while voices are elevated in community voice efforts, policy concerns can also be elevated, and the converse is true in the policy task force. Policy concerns can be elevated by voices that are not represented or have not been heard before within the Food Council. The synergy and collaboration of these 2 task forces can create some really unique and impactful opportunities. So let's dive a little bit deeper into learning about these task forces more. Next slide, please. So the Community Task Force, I am the first chair and now co-chair with Lorianne Grimes of Frontier Kitchen. Community voice and participation has been a topic of discussion for the Food Council for quite some time. As such, the Food Council leadership decided it was time to intentionally focus on community voice and created a task force specifically charged to work on it. The task force is comprised of representatives from various sectors within our food system. In alignment with our strategic plan, it was also important that the task force look at the food system through a more inclusive and holistic lens. Since October of 2022, the task force has been convening and diligently working through innovative ideas to engage and elevate the voices of food system actors. After lots of brainstorming, we came up with the concept of a community conversation roadshow, which afforded an opportunity for Food Council members to actively engage with food system actors where they are, which is the first time the Food Council has done something like this. Our goals of the roadshow include building a fully diverse and inclusive food community, engaging in building transformative relationships with food system actors throughout Fairfax County and the surrounding region, as there are food system actors who may not be physically located in Fairfax County and yet contribute to our county's food system, and gathering information and insight from food system actors that have historically not been engaged or represented. We hosted our first event this past January called Connections and Conversations, which brought food growers, makers, and recyclers together to learn, share, and engage. Lots of connections were made, great information and insight was gathered, and even a business partnership was formed. Here are a few pics from that event, and we were even able to have a cool logo design build brand awareness. We are now working to host another event where we are collaborating with partners in various food system sectors and specific areas of Fairfax County, so please stay tuned for that. Our policy task force is led by co-chairs Carrie LaCharity and Matt Carlos. And similar to community voice and participation, policy too has also been a topic of discussion for quite some time. The challenge for the Food Council has been around how we define policy, as well as how we would manage the nuances around policy efforts and member involvement. The task force has been convening since February of this year and has had lots of robust and insightful discussions to move our policy efforts forward. 3 policy breakout groups have been established, and they are access, agricultural food production and waste, and institutional procurement, business, and labor. As outlined here, their purpose and objective centers the identification, prioritization, advocacy, development, and promotion of policy issues and recommendations that improve and have a positive impact on food production and access to nutritious, equitable, sustainable, and affordable food for everyone in Fairfax County. And now I will turn it over back to Matt.
Earlier, we talked a little bit about the fact that there's an executive committee. The executive committee is made up, as I mentioned earlier, of the different co-chairs for the Food Council, the co-chairs for the work groups and task forces, and Diane and Alyssa as the staff representation for the Food Council. This group is going to meet every other month, roughly. We've been meeting more frequently than that recently because we've been really building some of the groundwork on which the structure and the operations of the executive committee and the Food Council are going to work. But now that we're getting through this orientation process and working through a lot of these things, I think it's going to be more of a every other month meeting that's going to occur. Next slide. The executive committee is led by Food Council co-chairs. There's 2 of us. Currently, it's me and Dawn. We operate on staggered 2-year terms, similar to the work group co-chairs. And so I am actually about a year and a half into my term. So we'll be looking to replace me and have a new Food Council co-chair sometime later this year, going into 2025. And then in another year and a half, Dawn will be doing the same thing. Ultimately, we hope that this really brings new perspectives, new ideas, and kind of rejuvenates and brings new energy into the council. We haven't really ever let anybody go in terms of like no one can really escape once they're done being co-chairs of the Food Council. We've generally had everybody who's been a co-chair is going to be on the advisory council, and we reach out to them regularly, and oftentimes they'll show up at a number of these meetings. So absolutely we'll be around and we'll be available to support and work on things, and we encourage you to think about how you might also be able to step up in either as a work group co-chair and eventually possibly being a food council co-chair, and bring your perspective to this whole process. The responsibility of the co-chairs are that they coordinate, plan, and facilitate executive committee meetings, and put together meetings with support from Alyssa and Diane. And in reality, Alyssa and Diane do the majority of all the actual planning work. And Dawn and I sit in and talk about things and give our ideas and express our opinions. But then Alyssa and Diane always seem to make it actually happen, which is great. We also work with the staff to determine different food council activities, actions, decisions. We would work with the executive committee to possibly agree to sign support letters and to develop plans and fundraising and structural planning for the Food Council. A big one that we're looking at is finding long-term permanent staffing support for Alyssa and Diane. Right now, Diane is operating with some funding from a grant, and Alyssa is operating under a temporary funding opportunity that we're hoping to make permanent when it would generally end in the next couple of years. And so we want to make sure that we can kind of keep doing that and evolving as a food council to become more permanent and more structured. We also represent the Food Council on the Partnership for a Healthier Fairfax. I mentioned earlier that we really spun off from the Partnership for a Healthier Fairfax. And so that group meets on a monthly basis. They lead efforts around the community health improvement plans, do community health assessments. So Dawn and I generally rotate responsibilities of attending those steering committee meetings and serving in that role as needed. When we rotate off of the Food Council leadership positions, the executive committee helps identify and find the next co-chair. And so that group is going to start that process sometime in the next couple months, thinking about who's going to replace me as I rotate off of the co-chair position. Next slide. And then we mentioned earlier the advisory council. The advisory council is not your traditional advisory council. We're not going to expect people to meet regularly. We are going to provide them with information and updates on what's been happening with the Food Council. But beyond that, we really see there's a lot of value in small group meetings and having individuals that we can count on and rely on for information and to help further our agenda as a Food Council. And so that group will be made public when we have those members on it, but we are in the process now of reaching out and inviting membership for the different components of that advisory council. All right, next slide. And I think I'm handing it back to Dawn.
Thanks, Matt. So as I noted earlier, part of our strategic planning process also involved defining and developing the structure around membership. This too has been a topic of discussion for quite some time as the Food Council has continued to grow and evolve around representation and participation. Using our mission, vision, and value statements as a guide, the Strategic Planning Committee developed a more inclusive framework for membership and members. This framework for our membership ensures that anyone is welcome to join who is committed to our mission, vision, and values, is willing to be onboarded through an orientation such as this one, actively engages in work groups and or task forces, and attends any of our meetings and events. Next slide, please. And for our members, this framework also acknowledges the roles and expectations as well as the value add or benefits of membership. We want members to be engaged, supportive, and to share and promote the Food Council in all the great work we are doing. Next slide, please. During some of the earlier brainstorming sessions of the Community Voice Task Force, We realized that as important as it was to engage and build transformative relationships with food system actors as a part of our charge, it was equally as important to ensure that we include a value proposition as a part of that engagement and relationship. The value proposition answers the questions of what's in it for me and why should I get involved with the Food Council? Essentially, your participation and commitment is helping with the support and to advance the Food Council and its work. So, what is the Food Council then doing for you? What do you get or gain from being a member? Well, you gain several things, such as access to and opportunities for connection and collaboration with a fully diverse and supportive group of food system actors who are also passionate about food and our food system, opportunities to expand your knowledge and understanding about food and our food system through various ongoing and upcoming efforts countywide, regionally, and nationally, and through your participation and commitment, the opportunity to contribute towards rebuilding a fully diverse and more inclusive, equitable, just, and sustainable food system for everyone in Fairfax County. And now I will turn it back over to Matt.
Slide shows a Venn diagram of the different work groups and task forces. And we'd like to bring this up just to encourage you to think about where on this Venn diagram you may fit. Um, Thinking about, what makes sense, what type of things interest you, what brought you to the Food Council in the first place. But we also like to show it because it also really demonstrates one of the big aspects of what we're looking to do with our strategic planning and the management of the Food Council in general, is that we're really looking for and trying to promote cross-pollination between the different components of the Food Council. We want to see a lot of collaboration, a lot of cooperation, and we're always looking for opportunities where the policy task force can support the work of the food access and literacy work group or the urban agriculture work group, or where community voice task force can really partner with either of the work groups or the other task force to really build, um, bring more people to the table, bring more voices to the table. So it's helpful to look at the different aspects that they're working on. Food access and literacy with their healthy food access, food literacy, food rescue, safety net programs, how those intersect and overlap with the community voice task force efforts of bringing, creating a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive food system, doing food community engagement, really reaching out into the community, sharing the perspectives of the council and different members of the community, to the policy task force, taking a leading role in advocacy and legislative change, and really thinking about the overall food system, which sometimes gets difficult when you're working inside of a work group that has a particular focus. And then for the urban agriculture work group, looking at their work around composting, gardening, boosting healthy food access by growing it in the communities where it is needed. And so really, we want you to look at these groups, think about where you may fit beyond the food access and literacy work group. We'd love to encourage you to think about participating in the community voice task force as appropriate, or the policy task force, or even there's a fair amount of folks who actually come to multiple meetings, if not all the meetings. And we want to encourage that so that you know what's going on. Ultimately, we're also trying to look for opportunities to have the groups and task forces collaborate directly. And so you may have some combined meetings that you're going to attend in the future, and have that opportunity to really brainstorm and think about ways that we can think as a full food council, because really the food council doesn't meet often as a large full group. Generally, we meet as the subgroups, and then things get pushed up to the executive committee to really coordinate on a council-wide approach. But we're looking for more opportunities to expand that. And then also, as you look at this, it would be really helpful if you think about what voices aren't currently represented in the different groups as you attend them. And so we'd love to hear your thoughts about how we might be able to bring those voices to the table. Next slide. So I'm going to give you all a minute to scan this QR code or take a screenshot of it. This is a opportunity to scan to subscribe to the different this is a form that you'd fill out to join the mailing list for the different work groups and task forces. So if you go to that link, as I said before, this will be available on a PDF as we send out after the fact, but you can also grab your phone, do a little snapshot, do the QR code right now if you'd like. This form you can fill out and say that you'd like to hear more about any of the work groups or task forces. Each group is structured a little bit differently, so you may get on a mailing list for one of the groups for regular meetings, or you may just hear back from Diana or Alyssa or the task force co-chairs if they have specific opportunities that you could be involved in. I know the Community Voice Task Force doesn't have the same level of regular meetings, but we are looking for partners to help drive some of these events and activities. So that's the opportunity where that comes in. Also, if you have any issues accessing this form, logging in, doing this, feel free to reach out directly to Dawn, myself, Diane, or Alyssa, and we can help point you in the right direction for this stuff. Next slide, please. And then this is a QR code to sign up for the Food Council newsletter. The newsletter goes out periodically to share information about what's going on with the Food Council and Food Council members. This is also a reminder to you to think about what information you have, either from your organization or your agency or just as an individual that you'd like to share with the mailing list for the Food Council as well. So often you will get emails from Diane and Alyssa asking for input for the upcoming newsletters, information that you want to share. This is a great opportunity if your organization is looking for staffing or has a new project that you really want to share information about or an upcoming event. It's an opportunity to add that information to the mailing list and help get that out. There's also some Food Council social media that also provides an opportunity to post information about upcoming events and those activities as well. All right, next slide, please. And this is just a representation of some of the partners for the Food Council. So you can see there's a pretty diverse group of folks involved with the Food Council. We'd love to have even more. So if you know other groups who would like to participate, or if you participate and your group isn't represented on here, please let us know if you'd like to add your slide or your logo to the slide. We can certainly make everybody else's logo just a little bit smaller to fit as many on as we can, or we can start adding a second page if we need to. Next slide, please. And we wanted to provide you with a few testimonials about from members of the Food Council and just to give you an idea of going back to the benefits of being a member of the Food Council that Dawn mentioned earlier. And these are things that you can also take back to your supervisors or your coworkers to talk about why it's important that you attend these meetings and why they should think about attending these meetings and to share with other people. So next slide. The first is actually from Arcadia, which is the organization I work with. I'm the director of operations at Arcadia. And I'm not going to read this. I'm actually going to tell you a little bit more about it, but you can read it while I'm talking. I've been involved with the Food Council since the early days of talking about building and creating the Food Council. I attended a number of meetings before the Food Council was formally formed as a steering committee. We actually had some site visits around different parts of Fairfax County, and there was a community health assessment or a community food assessment that was going on in different communities around the county. And I attended those meetings because I was interested in what was going on, and we saw the benefit of Arcadia being involved in the process of building out the Food Council. The mission of the Food Council and the mission of Arcadia are very, very similar. And so we saw a lot of opportunity for collaboration and partnership. And in the early days of the Food Council, when we finally had a project staff person who was working for the county at the time, Terry Siggins, I was working with Terry, and we were working with the Food Council to put in a proposal to the Northern Virginia Health Foundation to do a community food intervention in 5 communities around the county that were identified as being food insecure by the community food assessment. And We applied to the Northern Virginia Health Foundation. They came back and said, you can't do all 5 locations at once. That would be crazy. Focus on one of them. And so we started a project where we received a grant funding from the Health Foundation to do an intervention in Bailey's Crossroads. And so we actually brought Terry on as a project manager on our staff. So Terry was working part-time for Arcadia, part-time for the Food Council, and some of the funding for the grant actually paid for her time at the Food Council, which helped us really to establish that paid position with the council and in the health department. And so that project went on for 3 years, really grew a little bit each year, but it still stayed focused on one community. After 3 years in Bailey's Crossroads, we changed the emphasis of the program to focus on the Route 1 corridor and started expanding and reaching out into that community as well. That allowed us to bring on Juan Pablo, who I mentioned earlier, as part of the urban agriculture work group. And his involvement in Arcadia and with the Food Council has really led to a lot of opportunities for cooperation and collaboration with other Food Council members, with other partners in the Route 1 corridor. It's We've been able to bring in educational programming and offer it in the community. We've been able to take information that we've learned and shared it with other groups in other parts of Fairfax County. There's been a just tremendous amount of collaboration and cooperation and really force multiplier of a lot of the efforts that we've made. And it's been all connected to our involvement on the Food Council. And last year, we actually hired Juan Pablo's co-chair on the Urban Agriculture Work Group to lead a new community farm effort we're doing on our property. And so we've been able to meet people, bring on staff. We've been able to have our staff get more involved. And I really see our opportunities just continuing to grow in our collaboration with the Food Council. We do a lot of work in the Route 1 corridor with community outreach and engagement, and the Community Voice Task Force is really helping support those efforts as well. And so there's just a ton of opportunity for your organizations and your agencies to benefit from the Food Council, but also then give back to the Food Council and really keep that going. So I think we see our time and energy spent supporting the Food Council as just tremendously beneficial to our organization, but also to the community at large. And so we're committed to continuing in that regard for a long time. Next slide.
And here is another testimonial from our partner FACS, or Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions. And they said, our participation in the Fairfax Food Council has strengthened our links with diverse organizations who are dedicated to improving the Fairfax County food system. Thanks to the many participants in the Food Council's urban agriculture and food access and literacy work groups, in particular, FACS efforts are multiplied and the communities we serve are reaping the benefits. Thanks, FACS, for that great testimonial. Next slide, please. And here is another testimonial from our partner, Frontier Kitchen. Since engaging with the Food Council, our work supporting our food entrepreneur clients has truly benefited. We feel more in tune to the needs of our community and are more knowledgeable about the diverse resources we can use to help small food businesses grow. Working with the Food Council has opened up many doors of opportunity to our small food businesses. And we appreciate Frontier Kitchen for that testimony. And similar to Matt, within my own testimony, I have had the pleasure of being involved with the Food Council for almost 8 years now through my role as a staff liaison for the then Food Providers Network with the Department of Neighborhood and Community Services, and then with the executive committee as we plan the county's first Food Equity Summit back in 2019. And I'm hoping that we can plan part 2 of that. And also through my role with One Fairfax and our Chief Equity Officer, I had the pleasure of partnering with Frontier Kitchen and several nonprofits and businesses during the pandemic as we implemented a pilot program called the Coalition for Equitable Access and Economic Relief. And this pilot program concurrently addressed food access inequities in culturally and religiously diverse communities while providing economic support to local small food businesses. And within 2 phases, we fed over 300 families in the Muslim and Latine Hispanic communities with culturally and religiously reflective prepared meals and groceries through a contact-free weekend distribution. And this proved to be an innovative cross-sector partnership between government, nonprofits, and businesses where we were able to leverage resources and assets to address a community identified need. I want to also say that being involved in our food system in other roles outside of being a consumer has been one of the most rewarding and impactful experiences that I've had. It's been extremely humbling to see all the great work that has been done and is still being done, as well as the impact we are having on throughout the entire food system. And that is largely due in part to the participation and commitment of all of our Food Council members, as well as all the partners and other food system advocates and champions. And so, as we have shared the testimonials from our partners as well as our own, we would love to hear how the Fairfax Food Council has impacted you and your work by scanning this QR code. And I will leave it up for a few seconds for you to grab that. Okay, next slide, please. So, congratulations. You have successfully completed our orientation. We hope that you found this informative and insightful, and it encourages you to get involved or to continue staying involved. I'd love to give a special shout out to Alyssa Solomon for putting together this presentation and to Diane Charles for always keeping us organized and on task. And now we can open it up for any questions or comments. And I believe that we also have a poll that we'd like